Hello and welcome to today's IPAF webinar covering the 2022 Global Safety Report. My name is Brian Parker and I am IPAF's Head of Safety and Technical, and it is my pleasure to be your host and presenter today. We've got over 300 people registered today, fantastic, from over 41 countries. So good morning, afternoon or evening from wherever you are joining us from today. I would like to say a huge thank you to our sponsors for today's webinar, and these are Hinowa, Parzani, Skyjack, Gen1 and Inspire. Without our sponsors, we wouldn't be able to run these webinars. Just a little bit of housekeeping. The webinar is live today with translations simultaneously into Italian, Spanish, German, French, Portuguese, Dutch, Chinese and Korean. The webinar is also being recorded and will be on the IPAF website and YouTube channel shortly, probably in the next few days. But do remember you can go back onto the website and the YouTube channel to look at past and look at future webinars. We will, subject to time, have a question and answer session today, where we will take your questions and submit them to our panel of expert speakers. We will now watch two short films from our sponsors, Hinowa and Inspire. Okay, welcome back, and thank you to our sponsors for their video. Great insight there. I will now share my screen. 1 second. Hopefully, a thumbs up, and you are seeing my screen. Thumbs up, Mark. Is that okay? Good stuff. No point. Okay, great stuff. So, just to give you a little bit of an insight into the agenda, what we're going to look at is why reporting incidents and accidents to the IPAF portal is so important. But then we're really going to kind of delve into the actual global safety report for 2022 itself, and we're looking at a different way in which we're presenting some of the data this year. And this is all really important to give this data back to you, our members, and our people that put these data in there. So we're looking at short, medium, and long-term trends. And this year, for the first time, also we have a rental focus. So for rental depots globally, hopefully some great information for you on how we can improve and reduce accidents globally. And then we will, once I finish my presentation, a couple more videos, but then we're going to do a roundtable discussion with our presenters, introduce our presenters today, and then a summary and some final Q&A. Okay, so from IPAF started its accident reporting process 10 years ago, and this was so we as an industry could learn from the incidents, the accidents, share some learning outcomes, with the industry. And we believe that reporting as an industry will make the use of powered access even safer and save lives. I get asked, why do we report accidents? What is in it for me if I take that 4 or 5 minutes to report an accident to your portal? And I guess would it make any difference in the wider picture if I presented this one near miss or this one incident in our depot at 3 o'clock in the morning? After all, there are millions of MUPs and millions of operators globally. But I say yes, what you do share and what you do help and give to IPAF, once it has been anonymized and all names taken out, it might save that one person. That one person could go home to their family. And if we can save one person's suffering or their families through the harrowing ordeal of dealing with an incident, in my view, it is worth it. Remember, providing your incidents to IPAF helps us to help you by preparing guidance, safety campaigns, providing advice, lobbying where we need to, and ultimately giving information and support to our fantastic industry. As I've been speaking on this slide, I've been showing the new portal update for members. So if you are a member of IPAF, whether that's a rental member, a contractor member, or a safety professional member, you will be able to go onto the portal and you'll be able to get this data. But now also, you'll be able to look at it by regions too. And as you can see there, the final click of my button there gives you an insight into the various regions. So this is really great information for you to be able to look at what is happening in your region. And lastly, for those who do share your incidents with IPAF by either the accident portal or by the ePal app, remember, all data is safe, it's 100% secure, and it's confidential, but then it's anonymized. And what we mean by anonymized is all names and people's businesses and equipment is taken out. Okay, so moving on to the report then. So 2021 saw a record number of incidents and countries enter their data into the IPAF accident portal. 160 of those reports were either fatal or major, with 109 of them fatal. Now, it was positive to note that there was a reduction in fatalities on the previous year of 2020, which saw 126 fatalities, but we shouldn't rest on our laurels. The ultimate aim is, of course, to have no reports entered, but we must be realistic in highlighting that really only in the last sort of 3 to 5 years have we seen any real data being submitted, which is making a difference. This was always going to be a long process. If we look at the data for 2021, what we're considering in the report as a short-term data, it shows that falls from the platform is still the most common reason for fatal and major incidents in our industry. This is why we launched the IPAF targeted safety campaign, Don't Fall For It, in March this year. Please do look out for that on our website, and please do help to reduce falls from the platform in our industry. One thing I must highlight is the top 3 reasons for fatal and major have stayed the same during the 10 years. So what you are seeing there on the screen now, 1, 2, and 3, is the same, and that's something that we need to focus on. Medium-term data for 2019 to 2021 saw just under 1,400 reports entered into the database. 413 of these reports were fatal and major, and 303 people were killed. Some incidents saw more than one person injured or killed in a single report. And where we can look at all the various incidents, and the report is going to help you to understand that more, I'm going to focus on a construction site. 197 of them were on a construction site, of which 140 of them were fatal, the remainder being major. 69 fatalities also happened in a public area, and 67 happened in commercial premises. And finally, there were numerous people killed working on or adjacent to roads and highways. The International Safety Committee earlier this year prepared and launched the safe use of MUPs in public areas. This is the ISC, what we call the International Safety Committee's first global document. It is a fantastic document, and it will help you in planning and managing hazards and risks when working in and around public areas. So please do visit that on our website. It's getting some great traction in terms of downloads and views and reads. So medium-term data done. The IPAF 10-year, what we call the long-term data, has just over 4,400 reported incidents. Of these, 883 of them were either fatal or major. But to note, there was 585 fatalities reported to IPAF in this period of 10 years. Now, IPAF have over 1,560 members in 76 countries. So it's evident, in my opinion, we are still not capturing all incidents globally. When we look at the data in the countries that happen, we can see there that we have and this is filtered for fatal and major. We can see the United States, and even on other webinars that I have been involved with, we do mention the United States. But this is the country that has the most MUPs in the world, and it estimates over 1 million machines. So this is vastly going to increase the likelihood and potential severity of incidents. Industry sectors is one I think that's worth noting. And whereas construction is perhaps no surprise to you, the arboricultural industry is one that we need to work closer with to reduce fatal and serious incidents. And then with respect to powered access machines and the types of equipment that's been involved, the percentages speak for themselves, and it's probably no surprise for some of you listening here today. Now, one thing, if you watched the webinar last year, you will have noted that I did put more slides. I want you to go in and read this report as much as possible, so I've intentionally not put as many graphs or slides on there for you to see. However, there was one graph and one chart I thought would be really useful. This doesn't appear in the portal, as it's something that's been done recently, or very recently, should I say, but it's this slide here. And this is to summarize the 10-year data. And this chart shows the correlation between the top 7 fatal and major incidents versus the total number of fatal and major incidents. On the left axis, this shows the count of all fatal and major incidents depicted in the bar chart across the 10 years. Whereas on the right axis, this shows the count of the top 7 and fatal major incidents trends. Now, these are depicted in the line charts across the same period. So you can see if you've got the key at the bottom there, giving you an indication. And I mentioned earlier that falls on the platform, electrocutions, and overturns have broadly stayed the same. For example, if we look at falls on the platform data for 2016, this shows that there were 23 incident reported versus the 112 reports across all incident types. So again, these will be available to you to look at after the webinar. And finally, now I want to focus on the rental industry and the top 10 incident types, classification, outcomes, and machine configurations. Now, to be clear, these are all incident outcome types, so we're not focusing solely on fatal or major here. So this would include near misses, first aids, minor injuries, and also damage to equipment, including the fatal and the majors. The top 10 incident type, the 3 most common incidents are contact collision with an object or a person, which includes moving vehicles and machines, loading and unloading tip overs, and slips, trips and falls on the same level. Top incident outcomes: first aid, damage to machine or property, and lastly, near misses. And most reported incidents occur during the loading or unloading phase, when maintenance has been carried out, or while equipment is in transit to and from locations. Now, I haven't showed this, but the bulk of the incidents happen in our yards or depots and our workshops. So I really encourage you to read, download and share the Global Safety Report for 2022, as it truly is a great report and ultimately it is your data. Now, the report, I'm told, will be live on the IPAF website anytime now, and of course welcome any feedback and comments that you may have on it. Before we move on to the panel discussion, we'll now watch two short films from our sponsors Palazzani and Gen 1. Okay, thank you to Palazzani and Gen 1. That was great. Thank you very much. It now gives me great pleasure to welcome our panel. They have been patiently waiting, so love to introduce these now to yourselves. Guys, can you introduce yourself? Mark, do you want to start, please?
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever part of the world you're from. So I'm Mark Kiley. I'm the UK SHEC Director for Sunbelt Rentals, and I chair IPAF's International Safety Committee.
Thank you, Mark. Kevin?
Hi, Kevin O'Shea, Director of Safety and Training for Hydromobile Inc. in North America.
Thank you, Kevin. And Rob?
Hi everyone, Rob Cavalieri. I'm the Regional Safety Training and Compliance Manager for Man-Lift Middle East, and I'm also on the International Safety Committee.
Thank you very much. That's great. Okay, so reviewed some of the headline data from the Global Safety Report, but now we're going to discuss some questions. I think the first question is, rental sector is identified for the first time in the report. Can somebody, and I'm not going to take any names, but what's the significance of this change? Why are we including this?
Yeah, I'll take that one to start with, Brian, and then hand around. So I think quite rightly, IPAF have focused a lot on mute safety and operator safety and site safety. And whilst we've done a lot for rental businesses, you know, and I'll pick out load and unload as a typical example to support that, we've not really up until now focused on where the accidents are coming from, and then producing, you know, a structured approach to and access posters, toolbox talks, reviewing training based on that. And it's really only been the last couple of years where we are getting, you know, a lot more robust data into the system that allows us to do that analysis and then to, you know, bring that forward. But I think it's really important that, you know, as a federation, we give something back to our members to make sure that, you know, we can keep our members' employees as safe as they possibly can be.
Thank you, Mark. Kevin, you got any views on this?
Yeah, I think, you know, rental companies have interesting responsibilities when it comes to, for instance, the walking of the job, the identification of existing and predictable hazards. And you know, the feedback that IPAF can give to rental companies on the identification of these hazards, or to assist in the identification of these hazards, sometimes worldwide hazards that may not be local immediately, but that can inform towards better preparation for equipment supply, is really a really important part of the informational kind of flow that we can provide to rental companies, and their feedback is really important. So it's a really important two-way relationship here between the industry and the rental business to make sure that they're improving their standards and improving the safe use of their equipment.
Thank you, Kevin. That's great. Rob, you represent a business that's over in the Middle East. What's your thoughts now? What does the rental sector mean to you now on this side?
Well, it's a great thing. I just wanted to say that each industry sector has got its own idiosyncrasies, and the more we can drill down and understand what those idiosyncrasies are, the faster and better solutions we can obtain in our control measures. So that's the important aspect from my perspective.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much for that. Now, the data shows that, and this is a question that, you know, you analyze the data and then some of these things crop up, but the data shows that mechanical, inoperable, technical has increased. Why do you think that equipment failures has risen? Kev, do you want to take this one first?
Sure. I think there's a combination of issues here. Certainly from where I'm looking at it, there's a combination of issues. You know, it's been some tough times for the industry in recent years. And there are two aspects to that we've traditionally seen. One is that it's tough to exercise all of your duty of care responsibilities and be on top of all of your product when you're really struggling to pay the bills, right? I mean, it's tough for the industry in certain aspects of this. And secondly, when you're coming out of either a recession or a pandemic, as we've now seen, there's a huge accent on obviously revenue generation with the existing fleet that you have. And those are really important challenges for equipment owners, to make sure that the equipment is fully functional and to make sure that they're able to provide fully functional equipment 100% of the time is one of the big challenges on the rental for equipment owners and in the rental business. And I think after a recession or a pandemic such as this, you may well see a fluctuation or an increase in some of these incidents but it may well flatten out to a certain degree as the industry becomes more affluent, or it starts to operate more generally out with some of these exacerbating conditions.
Thanks, Kev. Robs, I'll move over to you now. What's your thoughts? I mean, why have we seen this, this increase in the mechanical inoperable technical?
Yeah, my take on it, I think there's multiple aspects there as well, but I also see that, engineers and operators and those people who are more now reporting failures of any type are more aware. We have more competent operators and engineers, mechanics, technicians, and so people I see who are reporting are actually, the accuracy of the reporting now is improving. So I think that's one of the significant reasons as well.
Okay, so the accuracy of getting these reports in is you feel that's probably shown a rise as well in this sense, yeah?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, Mark, you've heard from Kevin and Rob. Have you any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd say almost a mix of the two, really. So certainly we know that the reporting accuracy is better and the reporting is better, and possibly that might have been classed as another cause previously is now being better triaged, if you like, into the system. So I would say that is definitely happened as evidence of that. I'd also say, and it could be pandemic related, that operators and people on site have a large part to play in this. My experience working in the rental sector for 10 years and in the construction sector for 20 before that is that it's quite often the wrong machine in the wrong environment without people maintaining it correctly on site can lead to a failure of some description. So, I think this year is going to be interesting to see whether that data does sort of bottom out and return to normal levels. My suspicion is that it probably won't because of the better reporting and quality of data that we've got. But, I expect we may see a drop off in terms of the serious ones compared to the total number of mechanical electrical failures on equipment.
Thank you, guys. Okay, and just for clarity in the report itself, under the definitions at the back end of the report, it will define what we mean by inoperable technicals. So hopefully you can see that. Okay, I showed earlier a new part to the portal in respect of looking at different countries and different regions. When do you think we will be at a point where we can compare one country's data against another? Rob, you're one of the last country councils to mandate accident reporting in your region. I'm going to go to you first here.
Yeah, it's difficult. You have to make sure you haven't got too many variables, and then the comparing of countries will add more value. As a rental organisation, we compare between depots, for example, and between countries as well. It's easier because we have a lot of standardisation in our processes and systems and our competency levels and our maintenance practices, so on and so forth. So I think it will add value. I'm not sure when that will be, to be honest with you, Brian. I think we have to select which countries have got more similarities than differences, and then that information would add a lot of value.
Okay, Rob. Kev, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, I think just to echo what Rob was saying, it's really tough when you're looking at different cultures, even different construction environments, country to country. If I use the US currently where I am as an example, one of the things that's really different about the US, and let's look at even just the mass climbing work platform side as an example. The equipment over here is designed and built to take up to 20,000 pounds in capacity. The US still uses pounds as their measurement. Whereas if you go into a European type environment on the same product, the capacity is somewhere between 25 and 40% of that number, because the European use of the equipment is different. And I think there's another figure that I recently was on a call, and somebody gave me a figure in the US, which kind of took my breath away a little bit. But when I sat back and thought about it, it made sense to me. And that is that they estimate 95% of construction companies in America have 10 employees or less. And it puts kind of into context that construction environments and even the way that construction companies operate within those environments and the profile of those companies is going to make that analysis very difficult. And I think, just to echo what Rob said again, to look for similarities country by country may well be the beginning point of that. But it's certainly something that is going to be really worthwhile and needs to be done. But I think the metrics are important, and the establishment of a structure is important when the analysis begins to mean something.
Thank you, Kevin. Okay. Mark, do you have anything to add to that? I think obviously from the chair of the ISC.
Yeah, so, you know, not wanting to repeat what the two guys have said, but it is difficult to compare countries against other countries because of the culture, because of the reporting structure. Number of people in the firms makes a difference, as Kevin's just highlighted there. But I think what you can do over time is, compare a country against itself, and that's a good measure as to whether we're seeing improvements or not. Okay, so you're always going to get, differences as reporting improves, hopefully, that the numbers are still likely to go up for a period of time. But I think it will be very difficult to, compare, one continent against another, or one country against another. What certainly you can do, and this is, what we look to do as the ISC, is where countries have implemented, standards that are higher than the rest of the world, is that actually having an impact in reducing accidents? And, I can take the secondary guarding example in the UK, and, so over time, that's one of the focuses we'll be looking at, what people are doing and has it made the difference there? And if it has, then, that should show that there's a good possibility that will make the difference elsewhere.
Yep, I agree completely, Mark. And I think, this is also one to look at. We are working with our accident portal provider to also provide additional charts, filterable charts to our members. And also that, hopefully we'll be in a position where we can also put, fleet sizes of countries in there. So we may be closer to getting something like a fatal incident rate for a country that's a bit more accurate. Mark, I'm going to take this one to yourself. As chair of the IPAF International Safety Committee, and based upon this report, what guidance do you think that IPAF should be reviewing in the ISC, given what we have seen in the report?
Yeah, it's interesting, Brian. So it's still early days. We're just into our second year of the ISC. MUPES in public places is a great example of the work we've done. But I think, the three areas for me, is arboricultural. It's definitely electrocutions, to do some review on that. And I think, again, that goes back to pulling the best that the world has got to show today and sharing that across the world to show what is possible in terms of controls. And the third one, I think, looking at the data, is harnesses in your 3A scissor equipment, because people are falling from scissors as well as from booms.
Yeah, agree with that. Rob, would you have any other views there as a member of the ISC?
Definitely fall protection, and I think there's been a lot of technology advancement, and there's a lot of still grey areas in fall protection with MUPES, restraint, for example, and the systems that are available now, including the detail into the carabiners and so on and so forth. So I think that'd be a fantastic one. And a bit more detail and related to some of them, I think if you think of entrapment and the emergency and rescue plan related to that for MUPE use, I would like to see more work done, and we come to it later on, with the manufacturers on emergency lowering systems, on MUPES, and to see what efforts can be made in standardization more across some types to make or simplify emergency lowering procedures in mobile elevating work platforms. I think that'd be a good one in my view.
Good, great. Okay, I'm going to move on to another question now. I think this, and this is probably one that is highlighted in the report as in the top 3, but it's the second most common reason why people do become are fatal or seriously injured, more fatal than seriously injured. But what can we do to make users aware of the steps to take should a platform come into contact with a power line? What's the current guidance out there? Kev, Kev, if it's okay, I'm going to go to you on this. You live in the United States, where sadly a lot of these reports from electrocutions do come from.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, right? The steps that should be taken. I think the first thing, and Mark talked in the previous question about the agricultural, the kind of industry, the tree felling and tree pruning and tree surgeon industry. What's interesting there, just to touch back on that for a second, is in the US, for instance, OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, generally report incidents in what they call their FATCAT reports, fatality and catastrophe reports, relating to incidents where there is an employer-employee relationship. And tree felling in that type of industry or related industry can be missed because it tends to be either single employee or self-employee type work. And they, as much as they do appear in other government statistics, they're quite difficult to mine, to find them, and to find accuracy within them. And so I think there's a big aspect that IPAF can play here in outreach, in identifying areas where they don't have information at the moment, maybe as complete as other more mature aspects or areas of the industry. And I think that's really going to be an important part for IPAF when it comes to taking future steps with the data that it's beginning to pull together.
Thank you, Kevin. Mark, could you add anything to what Kevin's just said?
Yeah, totally agree with everything he said there. I think certainly, and again, reaching around the world, looking at where good exists today, the steps to take following an incident, is equally as important as to how to avoid getting into that situation in the first place. Because we know, looking at the data, that sadly, there's been people injured and killed as a result of following an incident where it could have been avoided with some better guidance and planning, so people knew what to do. So, always start with avoid getting into that situation in the first place, but we need to follow that up with, should it happen, what does good look like in terms of rescue and recovery.
Okay, great stuff. Rob, your region, your country, your experience regarding executions?
Yeah, the other two gentlemen hit the nail on the head. I just wanted to say, look, I'm a big fan of the Look Up and Live campaigns and awareness. The prevention side obviously is critical. So, and I think maybe a bit more detail and something can be included in a module with in the PAL card system somewhere in the IPAF training deliveries, and also maybe also understanding more. I mean, there's some good tech out there now in engineering that can help with this issue as well. And I think there's some room to look at that in a bit more detail, how that can help as well with this issue.
Okay, good. I'm going to cycle back now to mechanical failures. And I think, it is a growing concern, and we've highlighted some comments and thoughts there. Should there be a maximum life for powered access equipment? I'm going to go to you on this one first, Mark, please.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's been a lot of discussion, over this in the past. But I think if equipment is properly maintained and operated, then, it should be as safe today as it was 10 years ago. There's always going to be advancements in technology that may change some of the parameters of newer equipment. But I think we have to think very carefully about this because, we're moving to a more sustainable environment. And if, rental businesses change their equipment too often, or contractors require you to put machines over a certain age on their site, then the carbon footprint that you're building up is very large. So I think for me, the jury's out on a maximum age, because age and hours need to be factored in, and the working environment is very difficult. It's more for me about having the equipment maintained correctly and operated correctly, will ensure that the machine remains safe.
Okay, thank you very much. Kevin, you specialised in another industry in the powered access. What's your view in respect of that? The same question from the mast climbing and the hoist industry.
I think as Mark has quite rightly pointed out, it's difficult. It's difficult in a number of areas to provide or to gather information to take that argument forward sometimes. Let me give you the example I would use, and Mark touched on maintenance and inspection, which are obviously big areas of this, but the working life of the equipment and the environment in which it operates could be maybe one of the single most important factors of this. Something that's dragged out of a shed in an industrial facility and used once a month, right, and is well maintained, versus something that's out there working in harsher environments almost every day with a utilization number, north of 75%, right, in a rental business. It's two very different scenarios. And I think so, therefore, really going at it from the point of view of maintenance and inspection initially is absolutely certainly what we should do. But I think as we move forward in the analysis of incidents over the years, we may well find that the environments in which they work could be classified in order to look more into that aspect of it in some detail.
Okay, great, thank you. Just quick reminder to all delegates, you can put your questions to us using the Q&A function, and at some point, once we've got past the next part, we will be able to take some of these direct questions from your good selves. I'm going to move on to culture now, and I think this is one, I'm going to start with your good self, Rob, but in your opinion, your personal opinion, how do you think the culture of safety has changed in the last 10 years and why?
In our region, I've seen it 12 years in the region in the Middle East, and a lot of improvements, and a lot more transparency, visibility, and you see effective work from IPAF in their lobbying function with government authorities and government jurisdictions, also working in tandem with the rental organisations and individuals, construction sites. So it's a push-pull, and now we see the culture change significantly compared to 10 years ago. We see adoption of safe best practices and safe practices for working at height, in fall protection, the type of equipment used, the competency of the engineers responsible for maintaining the equipment. Even in the Middle East and UAE, the government's done a great job and moved forward in that area as well. So I see some big changes. There's a lot to be done still, of course, but some big improvements, very tangible ones, are seen. And it's a group effort from, as I said, the government, rental companies, and IPAF together. They're the main contributors, I would say. Thank you, Rob.
Mark, you've spent 20 years in construction and moved over to the rental sector. So what's your views on this in respect of culture?
Yeah, I think culture really starts from the top, and if you have in a business somebody who is passionate about safety and keeping their people safe, then, that makes driving a positive safety culture a lot easier. We align ourselves quite closely to, our customers, and our customers in general have very good, the largest ones have very good cultures, and it's about making sure that we have that consistency through businesses to ensure that our people remain safe, and we provide safe equipment to the hirer, and also we recognise the people that we deal with on a day-to-day basis on the public highway, pedestrians, where we're interacting with them. I think it's come a long way. Yeah. Certainly, my construction years saw a vast improvement, and that's followed through, onto this side of the fence. Okay. There's always more that we can do, though, for sure.
Absolutely, thank you. And just before we move on, I'm going to the last question I'm going to ask now is in respect to the recent health and safety executive in the UK's mass climbing work platform safety alert. Kev, you are the chair of the International Mass Climbing Work Platform and Hoist Committee. What is your committee doing to look and address this?
I think the committee is doing what IPAF is really strong in what it set out to do from its way back from its inception. And what we're doing is we're working with all of the equipment owners and the rental businesses that we have found and can identify within the market. And we're taking soundings from them, we're working with them, we're looking at solutions as an industry in a region. And I think that's where the strength of IPAF really comes in. You know, you can beat on the door of a regulator all day and try and get your point across. But when you're a member of an organization such as IPAF, and IPAF speaks for its members, then that's where the real strength of the argument comes in. And that argument and the strength of that argument is only enhanced by the collection of incident and accident data, providing trends and providing information that quite simply regulators don't yet have, because as an industry, we're providing the best information that's out there for analysis. So I think that's all of that is really vital in the resolution of something like this current UK situation, and IPAF needs to be at the forefront of it, and is.
Thank you, Kevin. Okay, we will now watch our remaining short sponsor film from Skyjack before the panelists will then answer some of your live questions. So please, we've got a couple of questions coming. Please, final reminder, if you have any questions, please put them to our panel. Thank you. Thank you to Skyjack for that. I've muted myself again just because there's some noise outside. But I'm just going to got our first question, and it was what is the difference between the grey and the yellow line listing crushing, trapping and pinching, and entrapment in the slide? So I'm just going to share my slide that I shared earlier, for those who are wondering what the question is about. So you can see here the grey one is for crushing, trapping and pinching. So they would be incidents in a depot typically where perhaps somebody's been caught between the scissor pack, maybe got their hand stuck, got their torso stuck, or been crushed or trapped or pinched, if that makes sense. Yeah. Whereas what we would say contact entrapment is where a person is forced between the platform and the control platform, or the platform itself and an overhead or other type of structure, where they will then go into sustained involuntary operation. So if that kind of answers that question on that, hopefully that's okay. I'll just stop sharing. Hopefully I can stop sharing. Okay. So John's put a question there in: how comprehensive are the global fatality figures? Can you estimate how many other fatalities on MUPES might not be reported or may not involve IPAF members? Who would like to take that question?
I'll have a go, Brian. So I think what we can say is we just don't know. There's certain parts of the world that report very well, and we know that the fatal accident figures will be, pretty much very accurate. But there's certain parts of the world that we have very, very little data for. So, you look at the number of incidents reported against a number of fatalities, and you would expect to see a vast number of incidents compared to the number of fatalities. And we don't see that in a lot of the data at the moment in the world. So we just don't know. We know there will be, probably hundreds of thousands of incidents going unreported, but in terms of fatals, it will be very hard to estimate. Kevin, what do you think?
Yeah, I would agree that it's difficult to estimate. And I think there are other exacerbating factors as well. The way that regulators report sometimes to help us to augment the IPAF data with maybe other data that we can go and have a look at can be a challenge. If I use just even one simple example, in the United States, they have regulations that were developed, signed by Richard Nixon in 1970, that have really not changed that much since that time. It was passed as an act of Congress, the OSHAC, and descriptions of products that were produced at that time still kind of relate to products that exist now but didn't then. So sometimes a scissor lift will be reported as a rolling scaffold. And so to have to go in and identify from that information exactly what is what can be challenging sometimes. So the more that members can report into IPAF, the more accuracy we will have as an organization and an industry. We can try and supplement it by going externally, but I think it just proves the point for more member involvement and more involvement from the IPAF side, because that's where the real accuracy is going to come from.
Okay, thank you for that. Nacho's sent us a question. Maintenance is mandatory, okay, but what about new safety technologies in order to discard equipment every 10-20 years? Rob, do you want to take that one?
Look, it goes back to what we discussed before about, I think, a life or a mandated life period for a MUPE. But with MUPEs, you can retrofit some technology. It doesn't mean that a MUPE that 10 years old is not safe, but you can retrofit technology. Some you cannot, of course. I'm thinking about things like secondary guarding, and even some load sense systems can be retrofitted. So yeah, I'm sort of 50-50 on that. We have, for example, you might have a renewal MUPE renewal program in a fleet of 5 to 10 years. It depends on the country, of course, and how the kits are being managed. But I'm not really sure.
Rob, thank you for that, Rob. Kev, you any thoughts on that?
I think it's a tough one, but the equipment development has really moved on at some pace. again, looking at some of the regulations that exist around the world, there are regulations out there that will give you factors of safety on equipment. You know, like there's one in the US that says 4:1, right, on access equipment, which was something that came out of a regulation in 1969, right? And then we go through to, and I remember the early days of what we used to call, and you might laugh when I say it, bang controls, right? And now we move into properly and sensitively managed operating envelopes and load configurations, and you know, within equipment. The ability of the equipment to sustain a well-managed operating envelope versus the ability of a piece of equipment to sustain bang controls and an old 4:1 safety factor are two very different things. So again, you know, it is quite difficult to really analyze.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to take the question from Matt. More customers are now asking for guidance on clipping on in scissors due to client pressures. Is the present thinking still to advise against this, or is it advised clipping on only when driving, elevating, or descending? Mark, what's your views on that?
Yeah, so this is actually it's a good question, Matt. It's actually on our agenda for the next our next ISC meeting. So we know that people do fall from machines, but we've got to understand what's leading to that. You know, is the right machine being chosen? Is it in the right position? Why are people leaning over the machine? Because if you're in that platform's there to keep you safe. So unlike a boom that you could be catapulted out because of boom bounce, that doesn't generally happen on a scissor type machine. So it's something that we're going to have a very close and careful look at before we you know, we make any further recommendations. Okay, thank you, Mark. I'm just going to move on to a question there. We had a question submitted upon original registration, and this one is about lifting points on machines. And the question was asked, why are they not rated with load and part of a LOLA periodic testing requirement? Who would like to take that question?
Okay, I'll have a go at that. So lifting points, we have some MIPs have tie down points and separate lifting points, and some have combined. But I don't think it'd be too difficult for an OEM to put a rated load on that. However, it's a dynamic thing. It depends on the shock load, so on and so forth. And, you know, I think you could talk about safety factors and so on and so forth there. I don't know if it's necessary, as long as we understand from the data plate and the operator manual, for example, the weight of the machine, and we're using the approved lifting point and approved tie down points, and we carry out effective maintenance at the prescribed times and hours. I think that's plenty we need to do. But other than that, I wouldn't comment further.
But thank you for that, Rob. But there are quite a number of, and you know, in my experience of over 25 years, we've had many incidents involving lifting equipment where, you know, the contractor's not lifted it correctly, or they've caused damage to the equipment. Any other views on that from a lifting perspective? Yeah, I'd say, you know, my experience, the number one thing you need to do is make sure you put the slew lock pin in. You know, in probably, I can't think of any lifting where it's gone wrong, where, you know, the slew lock pin was in and the machine has somehow managed to overturn. But if you don't put the slew lock pin in, you lift, it becomes unsteady. You know, the center of gravity will change because the boom will swing round, and then the machine's going to go over onto its side. So that would be my number one piece of advice. Okay, thank you. We've just had a question in, and this will be the final question because I'm conscious of time and your time as attendees. What is the position in regard to other machines working as a MUPE, telescopic handlers? And sadly, we did see a fatality and 3 people injured on a telescopic fork truck as a MUPE the other day in the industry. Any thoughts on this? Who would like to take that one?
I can talk for a little bit about it, just for a minute. I'm not really going to. What I would like to highlight is something that I've begun to see over here, which may be relative to this, and that's something called dual rating. Where currently there's a process going on in the US where there is a dual rating process for what they call a B35 30.5 mobile crane, then being used as an ANSI A92.2 boom lift, you know, like in the second half of the shift. And there are great concerns here with any part of that process. One machine that is designed to do one thing under a regulation or standard or design standard, then being used to do a certain other function that may not be covered by the initial regulation or the standard, could effectively bypass very important testing and maintenance procedures that come from the emanating standard. And so I think it's going to take a lot of careful thought to try and figure this one out.
Yeah, I agree. Any other thoughts before we finish, Mark?
Yeah, I'd just say on that point, you know, it goes both ways, because sometimes, you know, people are using telehandlers with baskets on where a mute will be more appropriate, and sometimes it's the other way around. So I think it comes down to, you know, doing a risk assessment and choosing the right piece of equipment for the activity that you're going to undertake, and recognise that sometimes there is this middle ground where either one might be more suitable because of the environment and the situation that you find yourself in. But providing it's been designed for that activity and it's safe, as Kevin's outlined there, you know, then that's the most important underwriting factor. Okay, thank you. Lastly, Rob, have you any thoughts on that?
No, really, I think it's been covered. I don't have anything to add on that. Okay, thank you.
Okay, we are out of time, and I think hopefully we've covered all the points there. I think that leads me then really to sort of conclude the end of the webinar. I hope you found it useful and thought-provoking. But of course, I need to thank our sponsors. So thank you to Hinaware, Skyjack, Inspire, Palazzani, and Gen1 for sponsoring this webinar. And of course, thanks to our panels of speakers today, which is Mark Kiley, Rob Cavalieri, and Kevin O'Shea. And lastly, thank you to you for taking the time to join us today and listen to the webinar. Any questions which haven't been answered, and I've seen there's a few more coming in, we will try and answer them at the end of them and get back to you individually. Please can you take care, and if you can complete the final poll, that'll be really good for the webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.